This is my speech for major speech assignment number 2. For years, welfare has been the sturdy rock of the endangered American proletariat. When times get hard, there is a place for the troubled to turn to, yet we must ask ourselves whether this system is perfect or whether it requires updating in an ever-evolving world. I believe that change is needed. We need to reform our welfare system because of how easily it is abused, its taxpayer cost, and its lack of incentive for those using it. Welfare was established in 1935 by President Franklin D. Roosevelt. In the wake of the Great Depression, social programs seemed to be the only way to bring the United States back from the brink of economic destruction. Many Americans had been left without homes and were forced to live in shanty towns. School budgets were cut, and upwards of 200,000 young men left their homes to become beggars. Since then, the role of welfare has changed. It is no longer a necessity for the country, but rather a means of societal advancement. It is defined by the government as a sort of leveler of natural advantage, meaning that no matter your status at birth, every American should have an equal opportunity to exceed. It is an idealistic goal, but there has not been enough reform to keep up with the times. No longer are we in an economic depression. No longer are the majority of the U.S. citizens living in poverty. We are in an age of prosperity and high employment rates, and we as a nation are in dire need of reform in order to compensate for that change. The most major problem with the welfare system at this point in time is how easily it is manipulated. These basic rules tend to be uniform across all states, and loopholes are very easily found. This is especially true in regards to the food stamp program. The regulations on what you can buy are very poorly enforced in many states. The most incredible cases of use of food stamps include strip clubs, lingerie shops, and pot shops in Colorado. This happens a surprising amount in Iowa as well. In my personal experience, I have seen many misuses of welfare programs among close family friends, whether it be utilizing government-provided health care despite the fact that they could afford their own health care, or using welfare funds to pay for all the groceries so they could buy luxurious items and go on vacations with their normal paychecks. There are so many instances of misuse that it is difficult to continue to put up with the current welfare system. The misuse of government programs causes many threats to the American people. For one, it delegitimizes the welfare system itself, making citizens trust governmental assistance programs less and making them feel that their tax money is being thrown away. This endangers the people in the United States who really do need welfare to make it through a harsh time. If we as a society begin to assume that those on welfare are simply not contributing to society rather than our fellow citizens going through a rough spot, we risk creating an even greater socioeconomic gap between classes and risk identifying people as money rather than people. This same concept applies to the governments allowing illegal immigrants to participate in welfare assistance programs. Being non-taxpayers, they have absolutely no right to be living in the U.S. on the taxpayer's dollar. The inclusion of illegals in the welfare system detracts from the trust of the government as much, if not more, than the misuse of the system by citizens. Citizens wrong the taxpayer when misusing welfare, but the government itself hurts the taxpayer by including illegals in its programs. Misuse of the system, as mentioned earlier, is a direct waste of taxpayer money. Taxpayer money that is desperately needed in a republic that is about $20 trillion in debt, according to usdebtclock.org. As people see much of their paycheck disappear to pay for government programs, they expect to see their money going to good use. By not updating their welfare laws, both state and federal governments risk losing support of their people and having their citizens turn elsewhere for leadership. This general trend most likely accounts for Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders' rise to power in the 2016 election cycle. The last major reason welfare must be reformed is that it provides very few incentives to get out of welfare. So long as individuals have children, they are generally allowed to receive welfare assuming their income is little to none. Because of this fact, those on welfare have less incentive to get a job than they otherwise would. This, of course, does not imply that all people on welfare try to get out of getting a job, but rather that the government does not provide enough of a reason to want to leave welfare. When everything is provided for you with very little stipulation, why would you want to try to get a job? Even the most honest of people would feel compelled to discontinue searching for one. This aspect of welfare must be reformed nationally as well. An effort has already been made in some states. In Vermont, families are given 30 months on welfare, and if a reasonable income is still not being attained, the state provides a community service job to the individual, which allows them to pay back their community for their tax dollars. If this policy were implemented nationally, it would surely boost the trust of welfare programs. There are a few counter-arguments to welfare reform, but those that do exist are simply misunderstandings. The major one I will refute was presented by Dr. Lester Spence, an associate professor at Johns Hopkins University in Maryland. In his interview on NPR, Spence argues that welfare reform is a negative, but that it is because he believes that welfare reform means sending those already on welfare into the world without health care or child care opportunities. This is, in fact, not what is meant by welfare reform at all. Those who actually require government assistance have nothing to fear from welfare reform. It is only those abusing the system who will lose their benefits. Therefore, Spence's argument makes no logical sense. Reform in this case implies improvement from both the viewpoint of the American taxpayer and those who actually require welfare, as it will lose its negative connotation of being a non-contributing citizen. The people of the U.S. have been calling for deep reform of the welfare system for quite some time. As college students about to enter the world of the U.S. taxpayer, it becomes more and more necessary that we pay attention and advocate for what is best for us in the future, and one of those things is reasonably approach welfare reform.